Hello everyone, this is Geowolf from Productions², and here today to get started on our Developers Vlog 4 for Combine Insurrection for our March work month. Well, this month really, I didn't get too much done on the mapping side. Well, I'm still doing the mapping, but I only got some work done on 2 maps, and the reason for that is because a lot of the time has been spent within working on the code. I really wanted to make a point of getting the code done, or not done, but working on the code and getting certain things done and figured out for this update. So one of the things that I did was that I went through and created a new HUD element based off of the health and armor and shield / energy elements, using that same idea for that. And where are we? This one, I think. Altering it a bit so that it looked a little different. I didn't want it to look the same as all the other ones, because it was getting kind of, melancholy, kind of monotonous, boring, and whatnot. Whatever term you want to use to describe it. So I was trying to figure out a way to kind of stagger the length of each section of the bar. And the way that I came up with doing that was actually to add some values. Let's see if I can get the right one here. Here we go. Was to actually go through and add an extra bit of height to the draw function here. Add height to the Y position. And I did that by just iterating through and adding 2 height to add height, or adding 2 to add height each time I went through an iteration of this for loop. What happened after that was that I kept on having problems with the unfilled chunks, we'll say, being not being a continuation of the graph but a restarting of it. And I found out that was because of this line here, add height, getting set to 0. It should be set to whatever it was. It should remain whatever it was when it left this loop, because then you carry over the height that you've added to this one, and it continues the graph onward. With the same setup in here, though, with the iteration through and adding more height, more value to add height. So that achieved the effect that I wanted to do, and that took up the better part of the month. This part did here, because it was a real mind fill in the blank to figure this out. I tried everything under the sun to try and get this to work, and then it just, sort of came to me in a flash of an epiphany that maybe if we just left the add height value what it was afterwards, it would be would work correctly, and that's what happened. So after I finished that, I was kind of resigned to the fact that I was going to not get much done with anything else, and decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to try and fix one of the most annoying things that's been bugging me for past couple updates, which is the excuse me. Wow. Which is the overheat count cooldown value, or whatever it is, that the thing that will allow you to reuse a weapon after a certain amount of time has passed if it's overheated. That actually didn't work before, and I had to figure out why it wasn't working. And so I went through and did some stuff. Took a while to figure out what was going on, why it wasn't working, and it came down to the fact that certain parts of the code didn't work where they were at if they were in the item preframe, I think is what it was, in C-base combat weapon, or base combat weapon shared. And some of it should have been put into here. Now, when I'm looking at this here, and I think maybe okay, so I had actually removed everything back over to where it was and kept this here. But what I found out was that this was actually not even overheating properly. It was adding a stable static value instead of the actual heat accumulation value, which is new. Instead of the heat via whatever setting is in the weapon options or weapon attributes. And so everything was overheating at the same pace instead of a separate pace. That was the first thing that was wrong. The second thing was that this here was set to something else. It was set to like 99 or something when it was supposed to be the weapon overheat value, max overheat value, and the weapon information, which I also fixed. That was the first problem. The second problem was my horrendously complicated thing up here in item preframe. I went through, ripped that out, and redesigned it, and it's a lot less well, it's still complicated, but not as complicated as it was before, which I think was part of the problem. GHI item preframe. So, if you remember before, I had a ton of things, and it was just really complicated. With a whole bunch of huge if statements and all that. Well, I broke that down and, kind of broke that up and was able to come up with something less complicated. So let's just go and walk through the process here. So, it will only trip this section if the active weapon is what the current weapon is set to. If that fails, it'll come down to here and say if it equals the last active weapon to set up and the old overheat counter is not 0, then it sets up the information there. So that if you switch to another weapon, then switch back, the overheat counter value is not going to get reset. So you can't, it's not an exploit where you could switch weapons to, end the overheat cycle. And that sets the current weapon to the last active weapon to the current weapon. If overheat counter is 0 and there's no overheat, then it does just that. Else, if this isn't true either, then if get active weapon does not equal the current active weapon, and then it essentially goes through the same thing here. It just makes sure that if for some reason the last active weapon wasn't the current weapon, like if you go cycling through 3 weapons and then go back, it's not going to have that happen either. You're not going to be able to override the counter that way either. I thought up of that, making sure we had something like that after I added in the heating functions to all the weapons, and I'll get into that in a second. And then the else, if everything else has failed, just set the current active weapon to whatever the get active weapon sends back. And it's really less complicated than it was before. Now, getting deeper into it, the first thing we have to check is if the weapon has overheated, if the IO counter is 0, and if it's not already listed as being overheated, if the bool is not true. So then it goes through, sets the overheat counter, and then sets the bool to true. Next, if the bool is true, it goes through, and if the overheat counter is false, not 0, it takes 1 off the counter. If it is 0, it sets the weapon overheat to 0.01 underneath the max overheat. So if the max overheat is 60, it sets it to 59.99. And then turns the bool to false, so that the weapon will start to decrease the heat, start to cool off that way. Literally cool off so you can continue using it after the overheat penalty, is what it really is, the overheat counter, has been cycled through. If weapon is not overheated, you go through and you say, okay, so we make sure that the weapon isn't overheated, and that the IO counter is 0. And then again, we check to make sure that the overheat is greater than 0. and we go through and take the dissipation value out of the overheat value. Now, if the overheat counter overheat value for some reason is under 0, we set 2 0 so there's no negative numbers. And then we go back through this whole other process here that I just went through and described for you. This works for every weapon now. So we've added in all the values. There were 2 new values I wanted to add in because I realized that we needed to have them just so everything could be dynamic, and that was those 2 I was talking about, the dissipation and accumulation. Well, no, heat dissipation was already there. It's accumulation and something else. We'll figure it out here in a second. Where is that frickin' file at? Looking for the parse. Are they even open? Maybe they're not. Maybe they're out here. No, if they're out here, they'll be listed at the top. They're not even open, are they? Damn. So for CI. Let's see, where are we? Parse, there we go. So I added 2 new values. For accumulation, okay. There was 2 accumulation values added. Accumulation 1, and this is for this regular accumulation. Then the accumulation for secondary fire. Only for if the secondary fire is, bullets, or in this case, only for the shotgun. At present, for the double shot that it does, double-barreled shot. All of the files now have their values in them for the ones that we use. Let's see, scripts. And those are, if I remember, the pistol, the shotgun SMG, the AR2, 357, and I think that's all them 5, files. Each one has a different setting, or different amount of settings. For instance, for pistol, you have a max overheat of 60. The heat accumulation is 9 per shot, and the dissipation is 0.18 per frame. The overheat penalty is 500, but that goes out to about 2 milliseconds per frame I found. So this equals out to about 10 seconds worth of overheat penalty, I believe. Or maybe it's 5 seconds, I'm not sure, I'll have to time it. For the SMG, you got 90 for the max overheats. Accumulation is 2.1 per shot, and 0.14 for per frame, and then 1,000 for the overheat penalty. The shotgun's a little bit different and a lot different in places. You got 80 for the max overheats, 16.8 per shot, 23.6 per double shot. 0.7 per frame for dissipation, and then the overheat penalty is 1100. For the assault rifle 2, 99 is the max, 3.8 per shot, 0.11 per frame for dissipation, and 800 for the for the overheat penalty. For the 357, I had to go with something that's a little bit more, since the 357 is a powerful weapon, it has to have more overheat generation than most of the other weapons. So its max overheat is 75, and the heat accumulation is 20 per shot, with 0.09 dissipation per frame, and 620 penalty. They all work, I've tested them. I'll have a video showing all the overheating and cooling down going on. I wanted to add in another element just to the left of this one where it would show the actual amount of time the counter still had on it. That's going to be put in next month, or I guess it wouldn't be next month, but the next work month, which is going to be May, I believe. I didn't get a chance to get in there and figure out about the animations. I think that I'll have to actually edit the animations built into the model itself for the firing animations. So I didn't actually get to that yet, or haven't gotten to that to this month. Once I found out that's where they were at, I thought maybe the animations were built into the hard-coded in, or were in a file somewhere, but it turns out that they are in the baked into the model. So I'll have to work with that a bit. Next month. For the mapping, the maps I got worked on were the Stranglehold map and the Graveyard. I extended the Graveyard art quite a bit, and you'll see what I mean by that in the update. And I created the underground area of the base where their power generation system is at and all that for the Stranglehold map. That's really all. Well, I should go more into detail about the weapons themselves, I suppose, what I did to get them to work. Valve is very, 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 very strange with how they do the weapons. Only one weapon uses the primary attack function in C-based weapon and base combat weapon shared directly. Everything else has some sort of custom thing that's been made, and I don't really understand why that is for. Why they did that for. Every other weapon besides pistol has a custom way that they are used. Like, for instance, the SMG-1 uses the machine gun class from Half-Life 1, even, for its firing, the way it processes weapon firing. That ties back into base combat weapon shared, but in a very roundabout way, and it was really difficult to figure out how to get that one to work. But let's go ahead and bring up a few of them here. For instance, pistol was the easiest to work with, because it was it just went directly into primary attack and base class, which is base combat weapon. So it's real easy to figure that out. So all I had to do is say if Sealing pistol. Interesting. I'm just wondering what's going on with that. We got that there, but I had placed, I thought, this in a... Let me check another one. Maybe it's in a different one. So 57. I was wondering if maybe, let me see, go back to primary attack. Just wondering why it's like that for. It shouldn't. There should be a, I don't know. It should be wrapped around. This should be wrapped around in a if statement for the bool. If it's true not to go through, I'll have to see what's going on with it. But this was the easiest one to do because all we have to do is go to the base class primary attack. Everything's taken care of there. That's not the case with the other ones, as you saw over here. And here we had to do some editing of these. First, I had to wrap it in a if statement to check to check and see if it was overheated. If it wasn't, then you'd process the rest of this. If it was, you wouldn't process any of this. It'd go to else and then just fade out into nothing. So you go through, and you would do everything you need to do. However, I had to create a special function here called set overheat from special means just set overheat from special weapon, in which case it's every weapon except pistol, oddly enough. So what happens is that you take the heat accumulation value and you pass it to this function, and this function takes that value and adds it to the overheat, and then processes that value through item preframe. So you essentially bypass the primary attack period when you're going through this. The primary attack from from base combat weapon shared, because it has its own way of going through and doing that. It was a little more difficult, like I said, for the SMG1, because it doesn't even this, and I think also the AR2 don't even process the firing in a way that is recognizable. There's no primary attack function for the player. It does it all through an NPC kind of proxy, if you will, for the player that deals with the player and every NPC that uses the weapon. I'm not sure if this will overheat weapons for enemies, but that'd be actually kind of interesting if it did. So what happens is that you go through this and then you add this to the heat accumulation again. Same process, but it was a little more difficult to figure out because I had to figure out if this was the primary attack function that the player that Source uses for the player, or if not, which one it was. So I did about 25-40 minutes of digging around trying to figure out if that was it or not, and finally decided after I couldn't figure it out just to put it in there, see what happened, and it turns out that's what it was. That it was the one for player. I think it was slightly similar with the AR2 as well. Had the same kind of thing with that. Let's see, where are we? Interesting. Maybe I didn't end it on the AR2 yet. I'll have to check again. I thought I did. If I didn't, then I'll have to come back here and do it real quick. Let's see, shotgun would be next. That was an interesting one to work with as well. Again, it has a custom thing, but it's a little bit easier to work with. Same as with the 357 because it has a a discernible one for the player class. And again, we send it to that special heat overheat special weapon. But that's all I did this this month with the code. We'll get to see this stuff in action in the demonstration video that I'll be uploading. So thanks for watching this. Hopefully it didn't bore you too much or you found it entertaining or whatnot. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below in the comments section, and I will see you for the debriefing of the progress made at the end of May.